بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا يا أرحم الراحمين. That is, O Allah, teach us that which will benefit us by that which you have already taught us, increase us in knowledge and acceptable deeds. Surely you are the most merciful of all who give mercy. Amen. So, I don't know how far we're going to get. We're going to explore this, like I said, kind of like lecture style, but also discussion. We're going to read some parts and discuss some parts and ask questions. So this is the Michelle. This is the first part of the book. I'm going to, if we get to the part, we'll start getting into a little bit of hadith. Assalamu alaikum. We have. Welcome. Make sure you're comfortable. We're gonna make a circle. Something close to a circle if possible. Okay, these are not working. Would you want one of this one? This is working.
It's okay, I'll just sit here.
It's not broken. Okay. So the wisdom behind the circle, some of the Sufi scholars say that we sit in a circle, our hearts are aligned. That's the point. We're sitting in a circle. That our hearts line up. And inshallah, over the course of our discussion, our hearts come together. I don't know if that's really true. I'm just saying that's what they tell you.
Nice thought.
Yes. So, inshallah, we'll try to align some thoughts. What we're doing today, this is so. Did I bring that? Hopefully, you all receive an email or it's really just some notes on what we're talking about. We're using a textbook. It's called The Vision of Islam, and it's a survey of Islam from religion professors at the school. The reason I use it is because we have a lot of different backgrounds, culturally, or our experience, our education with Islam is different, and I've made the mistake of sometimes in these settings introducing a text that is well known for a particular school of thought, and it alienates those who may not come from that school of thought. So what I found that this book works, trust me on it, in that it's an objective book. It covers many things, but these authors are not Muslims. They're not writing it from a perspective to advocate for any one position or another. So it's very informative. And I did not believe it when I first had to take a class with this book. I was like, why do I want this book? I want a book written by Muslims. But I think that it serves a purpose. It's a very clear, objective book, and it uses, gives very good context. So trust me on that. Kind of play along with me, and we'll see. It's going to cover an overview of a lot of Islamic sciences. There are two other books that I also have that will be supplemental, and of course throughout we'll be bringing in the Quran and various hadith as necessary as we cover various topics. This is more so going to be like a map, so to speak, of what we kind of discuss. And our halaqah we'll use it as a basis. We read for a little bit from it. We'll have discussion, and then the second part of the halaqah will be totally open discussion. Whatever you're thinking about, whatever you have, definitely. Let me open it up. You can stay over there. So, any questions?
I actually have not a personal question, but the Halaqah is ending early today, right?
They end early today, yes. I have to be somewhere. Usually, you all are welcome to stay here, but you don't have to leave.
Oh no, I think it's just a couple of us had some questions for you. It shouldn't take more than like 5 minutes, but I don't.
Okay, so I'll take those questions once we get to like 6, and I'll be fine. That's okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And this is for you. I think that's one of the biggest things with the chaplain's office, what they were looking for in this position to expand from what Imam Hassan was doing before and what they've had in the past, is that they were looking for someone with experience working with students, but also someone that could provide just some fundamental Islamic education that wasn't politically skewed in any type of direction, but something that, because when you come to college, you come to learn, you come to ask questions, find out things, and you don't want somebody from some skewed or extreme viewpoint coloring how you're learning. And so that's what I'm providing with this. I mean, I'm not talking about necessarily what my school of thought is or this is more so giving us idea with what's agreed upon. And we'll have the auxiliary books. One of the texts is the theology and doctrines of the Shia community. So we want to make sure that we understand that from one of the scholars, the foremost and most prominent scholars here in America, Dr. Said Hussein Nasser at George Washington University. He's a scholar. And we'll use that to kind of give us some more context that we might not have ever known before. And then we'll be doing the same with, there's a book, The Evolution of Fiqh, by a well-known Saudi scholar, Bilal Phillips. I use his book because this book is not a book that necessarily goes into any type of ideology that he subscribes to, but it's more so, it's a translation of a very well-known book in Usul al-Fiqh. Usul al-Fiqh is the fundamentals of Islamic thought or thinking. And so it literally is like a direct translation. It goes through, it gives a timeline and history of progression of Islamic thought. It gives titles of maybe 20, 30 different schools of thought over time and what exists. And it doesn't really take a position. It's meant to be a foundational text. So it's something that I have read and I've used all throughout my studies because it still serves as a fundamental text. So
is this the book?
That's actually the book right there.
I thought I had seen it.
That's it. That's actually the version I have is a newer version.
Oh, okay.
I lost the one like that. I had one like that, but that's the book. So it's here in the library. You have to buy it, or it's online again if you type it in and put PDF behind it.
Yeah.
Everything is online.
Yeah.
Just
Just
don't sell it.
Just in
Yes.
case anyone didn't know, like this is actually a library. Like you can, like as long as you sign books out, you could like take them home. Just I don't know if you wanted like a physical copy of the book that we're using in this class.
So for this, we're going to I don't think this is. I mean, maybe this is important. I read it. I don't think it's important, but we wanted to do a kind of introduction to what they say about the book, and then we'll discuss the concepts. It gets kind of deeper. I have one of the hadiths that we're going to be discussing today to kind of going through its meanings. If we get to that, there's no pressure. This is not like we're not in school like that. This is not we have to finish. This is more so how we feel. So I will start reading some of this from the preface. Does anyone want to help me read? Not really?
Sure.
Okay. Be my guest. Thank you. Read a paragraph, please. Yes, please.
This book grew out of an introductory course on Islam that one or the other of us has taught at least once a year since 1986 in the program in Religious Studies at the State University of New York, Stony Brook. In teaching this course, we have dedicated our efforts to understanding the vision, that animates the Islamic texts and to expressing it in the language of a Long Island classroom. From the beginning, we have been faced with the problem of presenting Islam to many kinds of students. Most of them come from Long Island or the New York City area, and they represent an extremely diverse cross-section of Americans and other nationalities. Typically, about one-third are first or second generation immigrants from the Islamic world, ranging from China and Indonesia to Albania and Morocco.
Okay, the majority of non-Muslim students take a course on Islam because they need to fulfill a requirement or because the hour was convenient. Muslim students attend for a variety of reasons. Some are quite distant from Islam but have developed enough disquiet about American society to have begun the search for their roots. Others have parents or grandparents who have insisted that they must learn something about their religion. Still others feel that since they are Muslims, this course will provide them with an easy A. These students experience a rude awakening. Occasionally, an adherent of one of the political ideologies that are collectively referred to as fundamentalism attends the class in order to see for himself why non-Muslim scholars cannot be trusted in their evaluations of Islam. This diverse audience has accentuated the problem of how to present Islam without distorting it. How is it possible to explain Islam to both Muslims, who as a general rule, this is harsh, but it's their experience, who as a general rule know nothing about their own religion, but are defensive, and to Westerners who also know nothing but are instinctively hostile? That part may not be true of this audience, but this is their professor's experience talking. One way which we always employ is to have the students read various sympathetic accounts by contemporary scholars. Another way is to approach Islam not as an alien, not as a third world outdated enterprise, but as one of the several currently living worldviews that give meaning to the lives of billions of people. From the beginning, the basic goal of our lectures have been to provide Islamic self-understanding, and our lecture notes make up the substance of this book. So, anybody want to? It seems like they're kind of not trying to put a bad name on things, right? So, one thing that I've in my studies, especially in graduate school, most of my teachers were not Muslims, but they were Muslim scholars, meaning that they were scholars of the faith, but they were not Muslims. They weren't practicing Muslims. They didn't accept Islam. And one of the things that I learned from that is that the light of Islam, the depth of meaning from the Quran, the logic is enlightening, and it empowers people, and people that are, it opens people's hearts and minds to a whole new life, a whole new world, and it can do that whether or not we adhere to it. So it has that power. It's very powerful in the sense that the study of it, the study of the Quran, the study of Islamic sciences has the impact that it does open and elevate hearts and minds. And it's odd because, usually when you study things to get the benefit out of them, you have to practice them. Like you can't just read Grey's Anatomy and say you're going to be a surgeon, right? You have to go through the process. But in many cases, studying the religion of Islam does change people and can elevate people, and it doesn't always require the practice, if that makes sense. And this has been true. This is not just in our time period, but also in previous time periods. There are many scholars or important people that in Islamic tradition that are not Muslim. So yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I agree with that notion. I find it very interesting when people think that you have to practice Islam or for it to be directly relevant to you as a person who's either practicing or not practicing a faith. Because even if you're just studying history, for example, Islam is you can't separate that from the history of Europe or Asia or anything, honestly. So it's something you have to know. But then usually I find that people who don't want to learn about Islam usually don't really find any interest in history or the importance of context or things like that.
That's interesting, isn't it? So it's something that's different than how we learn other things. Like if we learn, I don't know, how to make YouTube videos, you watch it and you can figure out how to do something and you have to apply it. But Islam has it really, the intention that you bring to it kind of determines what you get out of it. If you come to it with an open mind, if you come to it with trying to gain something of benefit, then you usually leave with something of benefit. If you come to it with a closed mind, it proves your point. You know, you leave with no more insight than you came in with. Does anybody else find that to be kind of interesting? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to like agree with Saul and kind of like add to our point that I think like, and like you see it on like what like with Muslims, non-Muslims who are like, whether they're sympathetic or unsympathetic to like Muslims and Islam, like in general, like what Sada was saying is that people sometimes act like, oh, like either you're a Muslim and therefore you should care about Islam, or like if you're not Muslim it isn't like relevant to you. And I think like it really ignores a lot of context. Like I think sometimes even with our own communities we can like turn a blind eye not to the problems with Islam, because like in my opinion there are no problems with Islam. There are problems with the ways that people like use it and like to justify their own actions. But then like I think sometimes as a community we ignore the fact that yeah, Islam doesn't say that we should do like these bad things to women, but people who do those things say that it is from Islam. You know, they use Islam to justify that, and like because we're like, oh no, it's just not Islam, it's not Islam, we don't address like those problems, there is like, you know, sexism and like domestic violence within Muslim communities, and it's not from Islam, but sometimes Islam is used to justify those things incorrectly. So I think like being able to have these perspectives of non-Muslims who are like, okay, but this person like used this verse of the Quran to justify why it was okay to do like XYZ thing, can like really show us like, oh, how are like, you know, like bad people hiding within our community. And I think like that's something that we ignore a lot of the times.
So that's an interesting point. I think how should we see, is Islam a person? I mean, is it something that is tangible? Like, is it a book? Is it a thing? Like, is Islam a thing that we can hold on to like that? Or is it, what is it? Like when we say, because people, I don't know if it's a president, somebody said, I think Islam hates us. And I was just like, I was like, where did you meet this Islam person? Who said that to you, right? So, and I hear that a lot. People think, well, I think this, you know, Islam, and it's like, Islam is doing a lot. Is Islam, what is it? People say Islam, we hear the word, some people say Al-Islam, what are we talking about?
I'm just gonna say, I feel like people like wouldn't do that with like Christianity. Like people don't say like Christianity has done like so many terrible things to us, because like it's not like it's not an entity. You can't be like that. Like it's not a thing. Like you said, it's not tangible. It's like a way of life, and I feel like it doesn't make sense to be like, oh, like if you said Muslims are bad people, or like you interpret the Quran in a way that makes it seem bad. It's like people like interpret it the way they do, and then they live their life off of that. So like if you read it, and I feel like it's also a big thing about like confirmation bias. Like if you're reading it and you're like already like really hate Islam, and you're looking for like verses and you're looking to interpret it in a way that's bad, like you're gonna do that, and you're gonna find things like, I feel like in any kind of writing you can like read something and be like, oh, that's like terrible, it's supposed to be bad, because you went into it thinking that it was going to be bad, so it just like confirms the bias you already had. Yeah, I was gonna mention, I think that it's also a problem that's very unique, I think, to America, because our interaction, or America's interaction with Islam, right, is only through maybe like immigrants. Europe has had such a longer history with Islam. So for us, Islam is just that word, almost like the Orient or the East. It's just one word that's used to describe everything that's different, not modern. Just put it in that big category. So even though the Islamic world is so diverse, it's just this one word, Islam.
Well, that's interesting, and that's but the history of America is so much more complex than that. In that, like, does anybody know that the Alamo has like Moorish decoration across the front of it, on the inside? that denotes that it's the same architecture that was used to build Andalusia in Spain is in Texas.
Woo.
So I'm just saying that.
Hometown.
Your
So
hometown is
it's in San Antonio. This is Alamo.
Really? Yeah. Oh wow. That's what I
Is
was.
Yeah, San Antonio. San Antonio, Texas. No one talks
It's
about
a
it.
building in a town. No one talks about it.
Right.
Especially people talk about the Alamo.
Well, another example. So this is just again, this is Spanish, but when I went to Spain. I think I mentioned this last time. I went to Spain in 2018, and I was at Granada. And Granada is the Sierra Nevada mountains. That's the mountain range, and then the valley is Granada. And so I'm hearing all these names, and I'm seeing all this architecture. It looks like California. It looks like Florida. It looks like all these places, and I'm like, I thought that was Spanish architecture. I said no, because Spain doesn't look like, if you go to Madrid, Barcelona doesn't look like that at all. It's only this what's known as Andalusia. So what we term in America as Spanish architecture is Islamic architecture. Nobody talks about that. But in Spain, they're telling us this on the tours, and I'm sitting there. It's like they're not saying it's Islamic architecture. They're saying that it's the Moors who were here. This is their architecture. They said they also traveled with Columbus. They went to America. They built a lot of the structures. They're telling us this, but we don't know this. And a lot of the enslaved Africans many of them were Muslim. And so, like my wife is from Savannah. In Savannah, Georgia, in one of the oldest churches, they have Warsh Arabic written in the side of the pews. So they have Quran written on the side of the pews. People didn't know that. Like now, people don't know what it is. They said, "Well, this is just some native writing." I was like, "Oh, that's Warsh, okay." And it's written in this script. That's Savannah, Georgia is the oldest colony in the United States. So I'm saying there's a complex history. There were Muslim navigators that came here. There were Muslims that were involved in trade. The first country to recognize America was Morocco. So I'm saying all these things, there's a complex history of Islam in America, and a lot of the monuments and things have allusions to things in Islam. So I think for the general public is just like you said. Is not aware of any of this, and it's like Islam is the boogeyman, this thing, this Orient, this other. But at the Supreme Court, they have monuments and statues of the most influential lawmakers. And who do they put at the top of that? Prophet Muhammad. So much so it was an issue. I found out about it because in the 90s there was a big issue because a lawyer was there and she saw that had a statue. Was it a guy? He saw it was a statue. He made a big fuss. He went to protest and wanted to get it torn down. And there was a woman, an attorney. She was there. She said, "No, this is a great thing. We don't want to touch this. We don't want to tear it down. We want to leave it here." And eventually, they were able to petition, went through care, a whole bunch of stuff, and eventually, it's there and it's not taken down. For us, it's something that we may not, as much as we don't want a statue, but for them, for this country to have in their founding most sacred place of justice, to have an acknowledgement that one of the most complete forms of law and justice established was through our prophet, is an amazing thing. And so it's very complex, very complex.
I shouldn't get into that. Like,
What?
how did they make a statue and depict him?
Don't go to the Supreme Court and look at me, get mad.
I don't want to look.
It's just not. They were doing in their the time that it was built. I guess what they thought was the most respectful thing they could do.
They should check out our laws.
The laws which they are celebrating with that statue.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't make.
That's like you don't want to be like, oh, take this down. It's like acknowledgement, but like it's not
I
the
didn't
right.
think it was a statue. I thought it was just a
Wait,
quote
in the
from the
Supreme Court?
Quran.
So they have in the Supreme Court. They have They have a quote of the Quran, but they have a
statue.
wall of.
Yeah, because
It's a statue.
I knew that they had the quote, the stand firm for justice wherever.
That's at Harvard University.
It is it. I think isn't it also in the Supreme Court though?
I have not seen that at the Supreme Court, but I do know it's at Harvard University.
Yeah, but that quote from the Quran I know is like.
They have a wall in the law school. They have a wall of justice in Harvard University, and that Surah An-Nisa, 135th ayat is up there on the wall.
Yeah.
Really big.
But I wanted to say I actually took a really interesting class last semester here, being Muslim in America, race, gender, and citizenship, where we talked about just even the concept of Western civilization, that concept is intrinsically tied to the Islamic world, because when this sort of thing about Enlightenment and Western civilization was in the Enlightenment, it was being the concept of a Western civilization was really being sort of formed. It's that's inherently a comparison or a contrast. So the ideals of Western civilization, which some of the ideals of Western civilizations actually has a lot in common with Islam, but it was very intentionally the values that Western Europeans and then later Americans adopted were explicitly made to sort of
it's in contradistinction
in contradiction to the Islamic values and stuff, where they said, oh, this is how these barbaric people do it, which is not flattering, but it's this is how these barbaric people do it, so we're going to do it differently. But ultimately the the Occident doesn't exist without the Orient. Is so inherently, just even the concept of Western civilization is deeply tied to Islam.
It's in contradistinction to what? So it's saying that Islamic civilization was prior to. So even in that same Western civilization, they're saying, well, as opposed to what existed prior. What's very interesting about that is that the actual basis of the Renaissance, all these ideological revolutions in the Western, in European countries, you can trace them exactly back to their discovery of Islamic thought. So you have it right outside the door, you have Averroes Ibn Rushd. They Latinize his name, make him Averroes. He's a great scholar, philosopher. Saint Avicenna is Ibn Sina. So these doctors, these surgeons, these great thinkers, again in Spain, in Cordoba, go to the libraries, and Cordoba was the Muslims ruled that area, and it was an international city, a cosmopolitan city, and you could go there and you wouldn't get robbed, you would be respected, your faith would be respected, and you could learn from scholars. So you would come and they would get all, we're going to university. The concept of a university comes out of the way Islamic schools were established. So instead of bringing you wherever the most populous cities were, they would then bring the scholars to those cities at the school, and then you could all learn it at one place, as opposed to having before you'd have to travel to whatever city to find the scholar and keep traveling. So the concept of university, when I was in Cordoba, they also said that the dress, the cap and gown that we have when we graduate, is actually from what we would call a thobe and a imama. But when I was in Syria, the imams, if you went to school, you had this blue flowing gown, and that meant, depending on the color, depending on what school you went to, whether it was law, whether it was law or jurisprudence, whether you were faqih, whether you were mufti, it was different. And then you had a different type of imama, different, maybe you had a white imama. If you had a red cap then that was different, it had different meanings, tassels, everything. So that cap and gown is based on that same process. Again, the line is not directly linear, but it's the same, I guess. If you look at, this is something that happens throughout history. So that if you look at Greek and Roman civilization, they copied Egyptian civilization exactly, to the pantheon of gods, to the way they established the city. Same thing with the Washington D.C. is designed off of the same type of map. that would be ancient Egypt, that would be Rome, that would be Greece. So copying these ideals as a way of emulating past successes to get more success is something that happens throughout history. So it's an imitation is the best form of flattery. Yes.
I think that just reminded me of, like, I think, like, it's interesting how, like, in, like, American society, and I mean, maybe in other, like, Western societies too, but I don't know, but in American society at least, we, like, don't really think about or, like, the people in general don't really think about the good things they've gotten from, like, Islamic civilization, like all these things that you're mentioning. But I think it's also interesting how it can be the other way around, where, like, there's this idea of, like, oh, like the good things that are happening in the Islamic world now is because they are conforming to our Western ideals, as opposed, like, I know it was, like, even, like, with the concepts of, like, human rights and stuff, where, like, you know, like, you'll hear, like, American people, I mean, the people who, like, know a little bit, but they'll say, like, oh, like, honor killings are, like a Muslim problem, because, like, and look, the law even supports it, that it says in, like, I forget which country, there were, like, several countries, like Algeria and Turkey, I think, where it was basically, like, if a man finds his wife having an affair and he kills, like, the wife and whoever she's having the affair with, it's, like, a crime of passion, so it's, like, a lesser crime. But and people are saying, see, this is so barbaric, the law is, like, institutionalizing, like, honor killings and, like, letting them get away from it, but that's literally a law from the French Penal Code. From, like, the people who then went and colonized, those were not laws that were, like, you know, so I think, like, a lot of the things that they see as, like, barbaric in, like, Muslim cultures actually come from their culture, or, like, are from just, like, not even necessarily, it's not, like, all the bad things in, like, Muslim cultures are from, like, Western society, but I think there's definitely that just, like, inherent, like, assumption that, like, even amongst, like scholars, like, I've had, like, professors say some really messed up things about, like, Muslims and Islam, like, even amongst, like, so-called, like, educated and, like, worldly people, there is kind of this, like, oh yeah, like, Muslim world backwards and, like, sexist and whatever thing, and Western world, like, enlightened and, like, good.
And I think that, so I want to bring it back to the question that we asked at the beginning when we were reading here. See, this is what happens when we know incomplete portions of the story. When we don't know, we only know part of it. Like, if you know that the Renaissance started because in Cordoba they were translating the books of Ibn Rushd, and they were Ibn Sina, they were translating these books, and there was direct conversation between various scholars of various faiths at the time, and they were advancing their society. That if you know that in Italy, the Medici, in Florence, I want to say the Medici. These big merchants, how they got their start was their relationship with the Moors. How the building and their science of castle building, all these things came from their relationships and trade with the Moors. Also, there are two places where this Renaissance books came out of: Florence, Italy, and Cordoba, Spain. Those directly come to. If you go there, you'll find thousands of years of history of Muslims being in that place, and so it's not an accident. So the story is just more convoluted. So let's go back. We're talking about what is Islam? What is it? Is it a tangible thing? People say Islam hates us, or Islam is boogeyman, or Islam is backwards. But what are they really saying? What does that really mean? Like, what if we take just a step back? What is Islam?
I think it was Mais who said it. I think Islam is a way of life. I think the Quran is a means of a way to live your life, because it's the direct word of God. And I mean, it's recommended for us to emulate the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the stuff that he would do. So I think Islam, and it's if you want to